You're listening to the CaribClimate Podcast, produced by the Investment Plan for the Caribbean Regional Track of the Pilot Program for Climate Resilience, funded by the Inter-American Development Bank through the Climate Investment Funds, and implemented by the Project Management Unit of the University of the West Indies Mona Office for Research and Innovation.
What if there was a way farmers could predict the outcome of their harvest before they started to plant? Actually, there is. In this episode of the CaribClimate Podcast, climate science merges with agriculture science. Agrometeorologist and consultant with the Caribbean Regional PPCR, Dr. Dale Rankine, digs deep into crop modeling. Crop modeling is an essential part of creating solutions to climate impacts on agriculture. But what is a crop model?
What's a crop model? It's simply a model that describes the processes of crop growth and development as a function of a number of different parameters. For example, your weather conditions, your soil conditions, and your crop management. It is essentially a computer program or software that uses a number of different mathematical equations to describe real-life conditions, but in a virtual environment. It is actually now using the information that you have of your specific location to try to find ways in which you can mimic what is actually done in the field. So, for example, you will take the weather conditions of your location, typically using a weather station, and the parameters that we use are maximum temperature, minimum temperature, solar radiation, and rainfall. You will have some information about your soil, and of course your crop management. When you plant, how close you plant, when did you fertilize, did you irrigate or not, and when. You use that information and you actually go in the field and you measure the data. Then you come to your crop model, and what you do is to put that information in the model and see how close you can come to what you're measuring.
How does one determine the reliability of crop modeling?
You know your model is doing well if you measure and what you get in the model is close. So, for example, if I reap and I get 20 tons per hectare, and my model says I got 18 or I got 22, that is a plus or minus 10% error, which is a usual acceptable error in modeling. And so the closer you what you measure is to what you simulate, then the better your model is performing.
How has crop modeling benefited food production systems?
Oh, it has helped significantly. If you can consider one of the challenges that we have now is that we face a number of challenges from climate change and climate variability. Changes in rainfall patterns, significant changes in our temperature regime. And of course, we have, extremes, extreme flooding, extreme drought conditions, and so on. And what crop modeling has helped us to do is to evaluate and test climate resilient crops, specifically by testing the limits of how much our crops can bear. For example, how drought tolerant a crop is, and how flood tolerant a crop is, and identifying what viable alternatives exist. For example, can we farm different varieties of the same crop? Do we have to switch to other crops, for example? Can we identify when the limits of our crop resilience has been exceeded? And if so, what can we do about it? So it has helped in very significant ways. One of the other things that it helps you to do, though, is not to make some mistakes that typical manual production would make. So let me give you an example. If you come to me and you say, I farmed this variety of sweet potato in Manchester and it did very well. And you say to me, you are living in Trelawney, why don't you farm it? Now, sweet potatoes are 3 to 6 months crop. I can take your variety and I can plant it in Trelawney. But it may fail. And, I may end up wasting money. If you think about yam, that is a 1-year crop, I'm going to have to wait 1 year to plant it and see if it grows. What crop modeling has done for us, you can take that variety, plant it virtually on the computer, and see if it is going to bear in your conditions in Trelawney. So it saves a lot of time and effort and money because it allows you to test where the crop will do well, and so you know whether your food production systems will work or not.
In crop modeling, location and variety are major factors that make a difference in plant yields. The crop experiments have enabled the PPCR to identify high-performing or reliable varieties of root tubers of significant importance to the region.
Sure. We've actually done quite a bit of work under the PPCR, and I must give the flowers to the regional trans of the Caribbean PPCR that employed me for 3.5 years. So we're able to provide a scientifically rigorous and credible way for measuring and optimizing crop yields. So we were able to establish experiments. We were able to test them in different locations. Some of the varieties that we experimented, for example, we looked at sweet potato, an interesting variety that we looked at. I can tell you some of them. Uplifter, they say it lifts people out of poverty. There's Fire on Land, there's Clarendon. There's a variety called Ganja. Now, the Ganja variety, and not to be mistaken with the one that is smoked, is one that we eat. It's a very, very versatile variety. It does well in very dry conditions and very wet conditions. So it's one of the most versatile varieties that we have planted. But we have also experimented with cassava. We have looked at the N called 22. One of the most outstanding varieties was one called the Bra 3A3. And the Bra is for BRA, for Brazil. And we have looked at one called CM849, which is a Colombian variety that does very well. Another thing we have actually done, we have removed a significant amount of the guesswork and uncertainty regarding varietal or specific yields. So if you go to the Ministry of Agriculture, anywhere in the Caribbean, what you will get is the yield of a particular crop that is not differentiated by variety. Why is that important? What we have done is because we found in one of our studies, you could get as much as 5 tons per hectare and as little as 5 tons and as much as 25 tons per hectare, depending on the variety that you plant. And they were planted in the same location with the same amount of fertilizer. So when you give a farmer an average value, which is what most of the ministries does, it doesn't tell the farmer anything. So we've been able to say, no, you can get variety-specific information about yield, which is tremendous. We've also provided a systematic way for testing both current and future scenarios with a known margin of error that would be both time and cost prohibitive if it were done manually. And we have also allowed for the testing of multiple climate scenarios that can help to do a number of things. Number one, it can answer a number of what-if questions relating to what if rainfall were to change by a certain amount? What if your solar radiation were to change? What if your temperature were to increase? We've been able to identify a number of remedial actions, and importantly, we've been able to scope and prioritize adaptation actions, including but not limited to finding heat, salt, and drought-tolerant varieties, finding the most productive way to plant in the future, looking at future planting seasons, for example, identifying key areas when the climate has changed and therefore we need to change our cropping season. And importantly, we've also been able to optimize our farming practices, such as when should we irrigate, how much should we irrigate, what irrigation system we should use, what fertilizer, how much, and so on.
Crop modeling data and its application have benefited a wide cross-section of stakeholders in regional agriculture. But how are the different agriculture stakeholders utilizing this data?
Well, we have a very heterogeneous group. So crop modeling stakeholders include highly technical people, like our extension officers, persons who are in the know, as trainers or directors of trainers at RADA or the Ministry of Agriculture and the Research and Development Division that know all the technical jargon and so on. They have been exposed to modeling. They are keen to see further application of the modeling. But of course, one of the problems is that there are no resident crop modelers in any of our institutions at the moment. So it limits its utility within the institutions themselves. So I would say application is mixed. Many are aware of it right now. We do have other areas where it has actually worked. I'll speak a little later about a modeling consortium that we have established at the University of the West Indies Mona campus, for example, and also a regional group of scientists that have been working together where that is concerned. But I will say that we need more investment of time, talent, and treasure in order for us to maximize the benefits in the Caribbean. If you're exposed to modeling and you don't use the skills, you lose it. And that is one of the challenges that we've had, where we have trained persons understand, but they're not utilizing it in the way it should be done. And so that is one area where we definitely need further work.
Despite the lack of resident crop modelers, the Regional PPCR project, led by Dr. Rankine, conducted various training in crop modeling to provide exposure to a diverse group of agriculture interests, including student researchers.
We have held a number of training sessions, both here in Jamaica and abroad. So, for example, we held a training in Trinidad where we brought together all the country representatives, all the 15 country representatives from the 15 different islands operated by the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute, CARDI. And they were trained for a week in crop modeling, crop simulation modeling. A number of them have, been intrigued and are trying to, find ways and means of incorporating what they have learned into their everyday work. We held a summer training program in 2018. We had over 50 participants drawn from public sector, private sector, sector specialists, extension officers, CARDI representatives again, academic students, policymakers, decision makers, farmers, farming managers, and private sector stakeholders. And they were trained in the use of 2 different crop modeling software altogether. And coming out of that, a number of interesting, overtures were made. For example, one company reached out to us to model sugarcane. Another was quite keen and interested in us looking at coconut, for example. We have a Mona modeling consortium comprising undergraduate students, graduates, and postdoctoral researchers that's right now working on an exciting application of the model. So that has done quite well for us. We have a Caribbean Modelers group that interacts virtually via WhatsApp, where if persons have any questions on modeling, they can contact us and we can help them on the spot.
Kistian Flemming, Climate Change and Development Specialist at the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute, CARDI, shares his perspective on the crop modeling training experience.
So my was I believe a very great experience to see climate data come together with crop data, and how both of them, when married, can really be a powerful tool in understanding how crops perform under various climate regimes. I am particularly interested in how we can use climate information, including crop modeling information, to help inform our decision making in the agriculture sector. So one of the things that I became immediately aware of is when we are thinking about food security, oftentimes we simply think about the food. We simply think about having more sweet potatoes or more dasheen or more corn, as the case may be. But what I became aware of is that when we are speaking about more of these things, more crops and expanding production and boosting local production and food availability, there are oftentimes some neglected factors as we speak about that. Because if we are speaking about producing more, inadvertently we are also speaking about having more water or more access to water, which is a very key component in expanding agriculture production. We can't produce without water, so therefore if we are speaking to expanding agriculture production in the region, we need to also speak synonymously with expanding water or increasing water availability for agriculture production. We can't continue to talk as though they don't go together. So that's one example.
Dr. Rankine emphasizes the need for more resource input for crop modeling so the region can boost agriculture output.
But I would say more resources are needed to do hands-on training in country. It's one thing to come to a training session, it's another thing to go back to your country, persuade your persons and your managers to invest in it. We need to conduct modeling experiments in other islands so that they can see the benefit. We need to mainstream modeling into the routine operation of the Caribbean agriculture sector. I think we need to host at least one Caribbean modelers meeting every year. But this doesn't have to be as a standalone item. Right now, the Climate Studies Group, Mona, CSGM, holds an annual Caribbean modelers meeting every year. I think we could simply dovetail on that and bring in our crop modelers and would-be modelers so that we can expose them to the latest science, set the regional modeling agenda, and meet emerging needs of the region.
Crop modeling can transform the future of Caribbean agriculture if done under the right conditions. But what considerations should regional interests keep in mind for crop modeling?
We had a number of challenges. First of all, crop modeling, let me just say this, crop modeling has a number of auxiliary benefits. But of course, it needs financial resources. It needs persons who are willing partners to fund applied research. Modeling takes time and effort, and you cannot do it in a hurry. For example, if you need a good model that is properly parameterized, that can give you excellent outputs, you need good field experiments in at least 2 locations for 2 crop seasons, right? You need that. So there must be statistically unbiased setup so that you can have, if you're going to test, for example, if I were going to test to see if there's a difference between irrigated production and rain-fed production of a particular crop, for example, I would need at least 3 replicates, meaning I would have to plant each variety 3 times to ensure that nothing is done by chance, yes? I'd have to randomize it, put it in different parts of the field to ensure that when I get the data, it's not because one part of the experiment was done where the soil was good and another part was done where it is bad, right? So one of the challenges that we found was finding willing field partners. Several crop parameters have to be measured at regular intervals, some of them every day, some of them every month, some of them every week. It is very, very hard to find people who are diligent enough to do that. And you need weather data. And most of the data is available in Jamaica, and I worked at the Met Service for a while, is rainfall. Only now we have automatic weather stations that measure up to 26 parameters. You need at least a minimum of 4. And you need, so many times when people are saying, I want to model the growth of, let's say, onions in the breadbasket parish of St. Elizabeth, there's no weather station there. They get weather station from a distant location. That doesn't help us. So we need on-site weather stations. Thankfully, the PIOJ through a project and another PPCR project, a national one, is installing new weather stations, but we need more of that. And we need the data at a daily time step, which is missing in many cases.
Encouraging careers linked to climatology and agriculture could produce a field of future crop modeling experts to make the Caribbean more food secure.
Most of the people who do modeling, they are either interested in the climate science of modeling or in the marketing side of agriculture. It just so happened that I was exposed to crop and agrometeorology as a trained agrometeorologist when I went to Israel for a month. And so I saw that what we call drought, they call flood, and they recycle water 5 times. I was intrigued. I was bitten by the bug of agrometeorology. So from my life says from the cockpit of a single engine aircraft, I was training to be an aircraft pilot. I was called to higher service to serve the needs of people. And when I got introduced to meteorology, I went to learn the other side of the cockpit and never went back because I saw the tremendous potential that existed in helping people to feed themselves. And so I probably bring together a unique skill set and a unique interest in understanding what climate is, because I'm a climate scientist by training, but also understanding how does that intersect with agriculture. Now, there are few people who want to do that.
Climate change has also triggered a cultural change. Unpredictable weather patterns mean that farmers can no longer rely on traditional planting seasons. More reason for the region to rely on crop modeling.
Everybody knows that the Caribbean has 2 rainfall seasons, or what we call an early rainfall and a late rainfall, May, June, and September, October. For years now, we've been saying your primary rainfall is in September, October, and your secondary rainfall is in May, June. So you get less rain in May, June, and then more in September, October. Well, guess what? The State of the Jamaican Climate Report that was produced in 2015 has showed that in the last 25 years, we get more rainfall in May, June. But most farmers don't know that. They're still relying on September, October to give them most rain. So most of us still farming our large amount of our crops in September, October, when we could have get more from farm May, June. That is what crop modeling can help you to do, because you're going to, first of all, look at what your weather is saying, seeing where the changes are taking place, and then you can put that in a crop model and say, show me the best time to plant. So this is a classic case of how we can do that.
The regional PPCR has helped to advance agriculture research and innovation. But how can non-climate experts use crop modeling data for their needs? With the support of the regional PPCR, Dr. Rankine launched a groundbreaking tool for stakeholders to accept agriculture.
So ACCEPT stands for Agricultural Climate Change Evaluation for Production Transformation in bracket and Resilience Building. What ACCEPT did was to say, okay, not everybody is going to have the interest to do modeling, but they will love the benefits. So what ACCEPT does, it gives you an interface, a graphical interface. You get a map of Jamaica. You click on a location and you say, I want to farm a particular crop. You know what it does? It auto-selects the closest weather station to you, select the soil and tell you how much yield you can get. For a variety, nowhere has that ever been done before in the world, right? Now that is tremendous for me, because what it is doing, and it operates on a supercomputer at UWI. So you don't need to know the benefits. You don't need to know how to model at all. It's very simple. After we did the work, we produced a paper. We have produced 3 peer-reviewed articles. One dealing with sweet potato, one dealing with a canopy estimator, best in the world, and one the Principal's Award for Best Publication. And the latest one was produced in 2021, the first paper to be published with a cassava model published in 2021. In fact, we had to get special permission from the maker of the model because it was not yet published in 2021. And he is a co-author on the paper. That report has actually just made it to the press. In fact, we're in the process of finalizing the final edits on the paper as I speak. What it has done, it has used cassava as the case study. And so what we've been able to do now is say, okay, now that we have this, here's what we can do. We can actually look at what it is saying for the particular cassava model. And we can say, what will we get if we publish?
Both crop modeling research and experiments have enhanced the ability to make informed and practical decisions to produce higher yields and more profits.
Now, there are other aspects that we can look at crop modeling that we have not even explored. For example, I can tell you how much money you're going to make depending on how much yield you're going to get. That is so the ACCEPT tool can be as effective and as efficacious and produce as much information as the model can produce. But obviously, the more information it produces, the more complex it is. So we're trying to err on the side of simplicity first. Let everybody understand what ACCEPT can do. So ACCEPT tool is actually there. The modeling consortium is there. We did a modeling gap assessment report to show what are the challenges and what needs to be overcome for modeling to be done in the Caribbean. And we did just both for crop and livestock. Because I always say livestock is the forgotten stepchild of agriculture. Every time people talk about agriculture, it's crops. No, agriculture is crops and livestock. And so we did a modeling assessment of what does it take to also model the livestock industry. So we were able to also model heat stress, right? In fact, we have four peer-reviewed papers, because there's another paper that look at heat stress in animals and what is the current level of heat stress in the Caribbean on animals. And it made the IPCC special report, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, the 1.5 report for small island states.
What have been the positive outcomes for the crop modeling initiative through the regional PPCR?
I think there's an increased awareness of the value of modeling to the Caribbean agriculture sector. As I said before, we have 3 to 4 peer-reviewed articles, one that was produced just before I started and 3 that were produced in the thing itself. And that is tremendous. One, looking at increasing the accuracy and automation of canopy cover estimation. Canopy cover is important because that is what drives a lot of the crop models. And mostly you had to harvest leaves and run them through scanners, which was like punishment. We developed a software that allows you to do that with like digital photography. You could even use your cell phone to capture the images, which has been a major improvement. We did the parameterization of a model for sweet potato, another one for cassava, and of course I mentioned the latest work that we have done. We developed 2 software packages. I mentioned the automated canopy estimator, which is ACE, the Accept tool that I mentioned before. We have the establishment of a Caribbean Crop Modelers Consortium, and we have actually conducted a gap assessment of modeling for both crops and livestock that can be applied to any country in the region.
The CaribClimate Podcast is produced by the Investment Plan for the Caribbean Regional Track of the Pilot Program for Climate Resilience, funded by the Inter-American Development Bank through the Climate Investment Funds and implemented by the Project Management Unit of the University of the West Indies Mona Office for Research and Innovation. The CaribClimate Podcast, using data to make climate resilience greater.